Hello and welcome to the third of our Advent conversations. I'm delighted that I have with me today Abi Thompson, who is the Sub-Dean at our own Cathedral at St Albans. And Abi and I have also known each other since King's College London. My conversation last week was Suzanne Nockels, who was undergraduate with me as well. But Abi was not with me in that way, but she was part of our chapel choir when I was a sacristan there. So welcome, Abi.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
I'm really delighted you could take time out. I know it must be incredibly busy at the cathedral in the run up to this Christmas of all Christmases. But yeah, thank you for taking some time to come and talk about longing with me. So I wrote in my reflection this week about that sort of sense of God longing for us and us longing for God. I don't know if it's coming up in your Advent themes at the cathedral or as part of your reflections.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot really during this pandemic, particularly during the period where people couldn't come and receive communion, just what we were doing to people, and how I mean, I had taken it seriously, but it became very, very clear to me that what we were doing was starving people of food that mattered for a very good reason, don't get me wrong, but that the reason we have the Eucharist is because we need to be fed in a way that will send us out into the world to be lights and to do the things of God. And if we don't have that food that feeds us to send us out to do that, we become weaker and weaker and more fragile, and our ability to do the work of God is diminished. And I think it hit me so hard how important that is. And I just felt the excruciating pain of starving the people of God. And the longing that I know people have had to be back in this place here and receiving the sacraments again, and actually seeing people just sort of weep as they come back slowly as things have eased, has really touched me very, very deeply. You know, I knew it mattered, but now I know it matters on a whole new level.
Yes, I think there's something about both our buildings and coming together as the people of God in one place that perhaps helps us, you know, because I think we have that longing to be with God and to be with each other that reminds us in a time where we can be very individualistic. You know, we're surrounded by a society that constantly reminds us to look out for ourselves and encourages a lot of that behavior. And I think the church also brings that sense of longing to be together, that feeds into something that, as you say, will then send us back out into the world to be that light for a world that so needs it, particularly at this time.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you know, we've found ways of being together online like this, which is amazing. But actually, I think as time has gone on, I mean, I threw myself into Zoom quizzes with such joy and enthusiasm at the start, and now I'm really conscious that I want the smell of humanity around me. You know, I want the feel and the touch and the jostling of elbows and the human warmth, and you know, the little scent of perfume as someone walks by and you think, oh, I know that perfume. Those sorts of things that are about sort of human experience. You know, I'm longing for that again.
And it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of Advent is about the now and the not yet, that we see God's kingdom among us now in things like, you know, the ways that we are responding creatively to the restrictions that we have to abide by to keep ourselves safe. But there's also the longing for what is not yet here, both in terms of, as you say, our human experience in COVID, but also our longing for the kingdom of God that we get glimpses of as we worship, as we care for each other, as we respond and reach out. And I think we are in this strange middle time, aren't we? We can be together in the building, but we can't interact with each other in the way that we would like in our buildings. And I know I've been profoundly moved at I had the privilege of leading a funeral last week for a member of a previous parish, and to see the next of kin unable to receive a hug from anyone else there because nobody was in his household, you know, and to see people recognizing the importance of caring for each other in not hugging, but also that poignancy of actually this is such a fundamental human need that we are all longing for at this time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, all those instincts we're having to readjust and rethink, because as you say, caring is not doing those things at the moment, but actually humanly that doesn't quite work. And what I'm glad about is it hasn't started to work, it continues not to work, but actually we're having to do it for the time being. And I feel like we're going to have to set aside a lot of time for hugging.
Yes,
before long.
There could be some interesting events planned for the Cathedral of St Albans. No, sorry, that was said in jest. But on all seriousness, I think we're aware that both people will need to come back into our buildings to celebrate the sadnesses that they've not been able to come together to celebrate, but also the joyous occasions where they haven't been able to come together and celebrate. And we've been saying to a lot of families in a lot of different contexts, when we can, we will. But clearly the numbers as we go through this will be building up in such a way that I suppose in my mind I have these joyous kind of almost like the wartime street parties, that kind of, you know, we're just going to celebrate everything all at once, or we're just going to gather together and acknowledge our pains all at once. I mean, we don't know where we will be next Lent, but I think that time of Lent and Holy Week and Easter could become even more significant next year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And all the way through this, and there's the longing for the Christ child. And there's this poem that I've known for ages because I used to sing it as a child. It's called The First Mercy by this guy called Bruce Blunt. And it describes the tiniest animals who are in the stable in Bethlehem, and they are just drawn to the Christ child, and they really want to see him. But all these kind of rich and powerful people are coming to see him, and the shepherds are coming to see him. And so, to some extent, there's a bit where it says, "And these men tried to frighten us away," kind of thing. It's a moth and a mouse and a swallow, I think that's what it is, but they just kind of gently kind of creep forwards, and eventually the baby awakes, Jesus awakes and sees them, and it's then that he kind of beckons towards him. And there's this lovely sense that, you know, in all this longing for all these human things that we're missing, this poem has really helped me sort of have that sense of Jesus just kind of beckoning us towards him and kind of saying, this is okay, you can come close to me in this time, and soon we will all be together. You know.
Yeah, and I hope when we look back, and this is the whole theme of Advent that we've taken here is waiting in hope, and which is a very Advent theme, but it feels even more pertinent this year, that we're waiting in hope for all sorts of things. But one of my hopes is that as we come through this, that we can somehow keep something of that sense of longing, that we can keep a sense that it's right to have this longing for God. And there's something about both Lent and Advent where we're called to strip things back to make that space to reassess. And one of the things we've talked about in our little Advent booklet is that, you know, in Lent you do that in a very interior way, and in Advent you're kind of looking out at the world around you and seeing where God is in the world. And I hope that we will maintain something of the longing we've experienced this year, and not lose that as the busyness and the chaos of life kind of crowds back in when eventually it does.
Yeah, amen. Quite right.